Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ameer Ali. Dr. Ali lectured in economics at Murdoch University up until 1917 and is now an honorary research associate. What did I say, 1917? It's aging me, isn't it? His area of research is the development of Muslim minorities, with special focus on the minority in Sri Lanka. In Australia, he has held several leadership positions in the community, including being the chair of the Muslim Advisory Council under the Howard government, and he's participated in several interfaith dialogues organised internationally in the USA, Singapore, New Zealand, Philippines and Cambodia. And at present he's a regular columnist to the Colombo Telegraph and the Daily Financial Times. So we're very privileged tonight that Dr. Ali has come along to speak to us, and we look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, everybody. Good friends. I'm a Muslim. I come from Sri Lanka, a multicultural society. I live in another multicultural country, a liberal society, and largely a secular society. How do I feel to live in Australia? Put it in one sentence, I cannot be a more convinced or a better Muslim by conviction and behave as a Muslim as I do in Australia today than anywhere else. It's okay now? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I cannot be a Muslim by conviction and live a life that I am living today with freedom to practice my religion as I do in Australia had I been in any other Muslim country. You might be surprised. Because in every Muslim country, there are certain traditions which might conflict with the basic belief of my religion. Those traditions are derived culturally from their history, and they are entrenched in their way of life. So for a Muslim who believes only in the belief system, minus all those cultural baggage, I feel it's better to live in this country, a liberal society, where I am free to practice my religion and move freely with everybody else. Now, let me explain my position. As a belief system, a Muslim can live anywhere because the belief itself is only a small corpus of duties. First, the confession of the faith that there is only one God, and the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad, that the finality of the prophethood, there won't be any more prophets after him. We should believe in that. I believe in that. And history has not proved otherwise so far. We are the youngest of the Abrahamic faiths. So there are so many things common to us. That's why I don't like this phrase, Judo-Christian values. I would rather prefer Abrahamic values, which includes me also. So that's the confession of the faith, is the first, what you call the first item in the agenda. Second, daily prayers. 5 times prayer. To be frank with you, I don't pray 5 times. I'm a human being, I make mistakes. But I pray daily, at least 3 or 4 times. I fast if I am physically fit for 30 days during the month of Ramadan. So you do during Easter. I give charity. At the end of the fasting month, from whatever I have in excess of my needs, I give charity to the needy. I have been to Mecca once on pilgrimage, 5 duties. There was no obstruction from Australia in any of these. Any Muslim can practice this anywhere. That's the first part of the faith. We call it ibadah. Ibadah is worship. Things that are relating to worship. There are, if you want to know, something like 135 mosques in Australia. And there are about 600,000 Muslims living in this country. They live happily, they live freely. There's no obstruction to their faith. And the religion itself says you are free to worship anywhere you like. Sometimes if you walk along Kings Park or the riverside where I live, you might notice some Muslims praying on the ground. When the prayer times comes, the whole world is a mosque. There's nothing to stop you from praying. Because prayer is a dialogue between you and God. It's a formality that we go to the mosque. It's a formality that we go to church. Because in church and mosque, congregation is important. Why? Why can't we pray at home? Why shouldn't I pray at home? Why shouldn't we have mosques and churches? The church, the mosque, the synagogue introduces social gathering. We are human beings are social animals. We have to mix together. We introduce ourselves, who we are. So when these religions were born in a different environment, how do we know that my friend is still alive? So I meet him 5 times a day in the mosque. So I know him, so and so, how are you? So the prayer time, the gathering in the mosque and the church is also an occasion to know our friends, our circle. So relationship, social relationship is promoted through the way we pray, the way we organize our prayers. On a Sunday, this mosque will be crowded. This church will be crowded. On a Friday, the mosques are crowded. So it's step by step. 5 times a day. On a Friday, because the Friday has a sermon. The sermon is supposed to deal about the problems the society is facing currently, not about the past. What are the problems Muslims are facing today? How do we deal with them peacefully? How do we solve them? That should be the topic of the day on every Friday. Of course, there are additions about the history and rest of it. But the most important thing is the sermon on a Friday. Because if you know those who are familiar with the Muslim prayer, I can demonstrate here, but because of the mic, I'll stand here. On a Friday, the 5-time prayers are compulsory, obligatory. So on the noon prayer on a day has 4 cycles. A cycle means you stand, you bend, you prostrate, get up, sit. That's 1. 4 times you do that. Compulsory. And in between there are certain things that you recite, praising God in different words. On that particular day on a Friday, only 2 cycles. Why did we sacrifice 2 compulsory cycles for a sermon? Because the sermon is equal to those 2 compulsory cycles. So important. There's no point in repeating what happened in the past. The sermon has to deal with the present. How do we guide the community to live in peace and find peace with God, with your friends, and more importantly, with the society in which you live? Remember the Quran, the holy text of the Muslims, was revealed over a period of 23 years, not on one single day. It didn't come as a total holy book. It was revealed over 23 years of the Prophet's life. Section by section, verse by verse. That means the Quranic verses were revealed in every particular context. There's a context for the verses. So when you read the Quran, when you want to understand that, you must contextualize those verses and see whether the context is present now. So if you don't, then you textualize the context. You first contextualize the text, and now you textualize the context. Those 2 must go parallel. So that's the first part, on the worship part of it. Then comes the second part of a Muslim's life. That includes everything else: politics, economics, your finance, your friendship, your love affair, your marriage, everything. Now, here is the problem. The Quran does not tell you how you should do your business. It only tells you, don't indulge in riba. Riba is exploitatory profit, profit actually. It's now being translated as interest. Not the simple interest, compound interest. That's what was prevailing in Arabia at that time. The interest was compounding in making the borrower poorer and poorer every time. So the Quran says, stop that. Don't do it. So riba is prohibited. Just as in Bible is prohibited. So economics, politics, the social life, your personal life, all those are the second part of a Muslim's life. It's called the mu'amalat in Arabic. Now here is the problem. The Quran does not tell you how you should do your business, how you should do your whatever you like to do. So because of that, the savants, the experts on jurisprudence, in the 9th and 10th centuries. They studied the Quran, studied the context, studied the life of the Prophet, and derived rules and regulations accordingly. And this is what these rules and regulations are mistakenly called as Sharia. The Sharia, the word Sharia occurs only once in the entire Quran. A Quran with 6,440 verses, only in one place the word Sharia comes. And that too, not in a legal sense, but on an ethical sense. The real meaning of Sharia is taking the horse to the water. How did that come as the name for the rules and regulations, laws? The imams, the experts on jurisprudence, derived these rules and regulations in different contexts, which are really called fiqh. Fiqh is the Arabic word for regulation. But somehow or other, it has got this name Sharia. So it says, no, this goes against the Sharia. They ask them, where is the Sharia? Show me where God has given you the rules and regulations. The rules and regulations are derived by man, by human beings. They are fiqh. Therefore, they are subject to change. Unlike the rules of worship, the 5 pillars of Islam, the confession, the worship, the charity, the fasting, the Hajj, the pilgrimage, these matters are subject to change and interpretations. That is the problem that the Muslims are facing today. What was applicable in Egypt on the 9th century may not be applicable in Australia in the 21st century. So we need experts to reinterpret these things. When you reinterpret, there's no problem. But what happens is, the migrants who come from different parts of the world, like me, when we came, we sold our houses, but brought the garden shed with us. We brought the cultural baggage with us. It is the cultural baggage that is clashing with the circumstances, situation in Australia. Not the religion, not the essential aspects of the religion, the cultural side. For example, which I am dealing at the moment in Sri Lanka, the burqa. You know the burqa, the dress they wear, completely covered, faces covered. The other version of that is niqab, just a split here for the eyes to see. This is alien to Australia, alien to many cultures. But those who wear that argue, this is our right. No one can dictate what I should wear. It's my right. It's human right. That's true. I accept that argument. Even the court of law will accept that. It's a human right. Who is someone to dictate what I should wear? I have the freedom to do it. Fine. But that's a sociological argument. Sociological argument which is important to the Quran, which is there in the Quran. It says, you are one in the society. You are not alone. You are a social animal. So if your piece of dress is becoming a hindrance to interrelationship with other communities, other people, then you have a choice. Either you stick to your dress or you live in isolation. Or stick to your dress and live in isolation, or give it up and be a social human being. That is the dilemma these people are facing. The cultural baggage does not allow them to think like this. If you have read the papers or familiar with the news items, last week, 7 days ago, the Sri Lankan government has banned burqa. And there's a big uproar there. And I have written an article on this. Legally, they are right. The community should have decided, community should have had a dialogue about this, whether it is appropriate to a situation like Sri Lanka. It may be appropriate in Afghanistan or maybe in somewhere in the Middle East. Likewise, female circumcision. A controversial subject which has nothing to do with the Quran or with the religion. It's purely a custom in certain cultures. Now, today we are living in a different world. The women decide what they want to do. So I don't want to go into the argument. So these things are clashing in a society like Australia, in Europe, in America. So if you are a Muslim and stick to your essential part of your religion, there's no problem. You can live anywhere. But the other part, you have to move with the society. There's nothing to stop me from eating halal food in Australia, like kosher for the Jews. There's nothing to stop me from performing my duties. When we move, social movements. Now, I was witness to one incident that happened a few years ago in Perth. In the court of law, a couple of Muslim students, they refused to stand up before the judge. I thought utterly insulted. I asked them, why don't you do that? He said, no, we bow down only for God. What a stupid argument is this. The Quran says very well, Quran says, that's one verse it says, obey your Lord, the Prophet, and, this is the most important part, those above you. Who are those above me in this country? The government, the rulers, the magistrates in a court of law. In a society, the president. So I must abide by the rules and regulations of that society if I want to be a member of the society. I play bridge. I'm a member of a bridge club here. And I don't go and pray inside the bridge club because even when the prayer time comes, I can do it later. So this is the problem. People do not understand and behave according to the situation that demands them to behave. The Quran emphasizes in every part that you are a social human being, a social animal. I created you from a clot of blood, and made you into nations to know each other, to communicate with each other, to live with each other. There's no problem. The Prophet's Arabia, there were Jews, there were Christians, there were pagans in his society. He called all of them as Ummah. Ummah is the universal community. That collective unit he called Ummah, which consisted In that, Jews, Christians, pagans, and Muslims. But if you talk to the Orthodox Muslims today, they say Ummah relates only to the Muslims. Total misunderstanding of history. Total misunderstanding of the cultures. So, I come back to my original point. As a Muslim, if you want to pray, if you want to follow the essentials of your worshipping part, there's nothing to obstruct you. Then my second point is this. One of the part of the confession is that you believe in the day of judgment, like the Christians. One of the most important part of confession of the faith. You believe in the day of judgment. That means you are accountable to what you are doing. God has given you your body, health. Beyond all that, He has given something else He has given you, akil, the intellect. The Quran says, I have made all the creatures in the world subservient to you. The earth, the sky, the mountains, the forest, every other creatures are made subservient to Adam, the man. If God has made everything subservient to man, why should man conquer the nature? What do they have to conquer? They are already subservient. And it says, I have made it subservient and given it to you as amana. It's a very important concept in the Quran, which hardly any scholars mentions this or even explains this. I always teach my students about this. Amana. Amana is a trust. Arabic word amana means trust. It is given to you in trust. So if something is given to you in trust, like the orphan is given to you as a trust. Not to exploit that individual. Look after the needs. Educate that person. Get them married. Let them live a happy life. It's your trust. And you're answerable to that, to God. So, in here also, environment. Environment is given as a trust to humanity. It's the duty of the human beings to manage their environment. Because they also have a right. Animals have a right. The trees have a right. The fish has right. Everything has right. So you manage them. And at the end of the day of judgment, you will be asked to account for what you did. Same as Christianity. So human is answerable to God, the Creator. That is there in the mind of every person. If I am aware of that, I'll be very careful in what I am doing. There's a failure to understand that concept. The way we have used environment recklessly, that we have become the victim of its vengeance. All this forest fire, everything. Total mismanagement of the environment. The Quran is not that. Quran says very clearly. And I tell my imams in the mosque, for heaven's sake, in your sermons, explain this to the people. Instead of talking about things that are gone, dead and gone, about the prophets and things like that. That's what happens. I go to mosque, in fact, so about 6-7 years ago, I went to a mosque in the country where I was born, my own village in Sri Lanka. After 40 years, I went there on a Friday. I want to listen to the sermon, see whether there is any change. That imam For 40 minutes, mind you, 40 minutes, he was harping on the Jews and the Christians, and they'll go to hell. I was wondering, what the hell has happened to this man? What is the relevance of that to that village? There is problem of other problems, poverty, illiteracy. Nothing talked about that. It is about Jews and the village, Christians. Completely irrelevant and a different context that was. That's the problem we have here. We have imams trained in a certain school of thought, whose minds are closed. They don't read anything outside that. And we have a clash. That happens in many communities, but I am familiar with my own community. So strictly speaking, there's no problem living as a Muslim in a liberal society like Australia. It helps you it makes you to live better. I'll relate another incident for you. When I was the advisor to John Howard, the fasting month came during Christmas. You know, we follow the lunar month. So during Christmas time, the fasting day came. So I advised my Christian friends, when you invite any Muslim for the Christmas party or function, if they don't attend, please don't get offended because they are fasting. Immediately, a response came from my own community. So do you mean to say that if we don't pass, we can go to the function? In other words, they are saying that Christmas party is not for Muslims. What rubbish is this? This is from a different culture. A person from Malaysia won't say that. A Muslim from Indonesia won't say that. In Malaysia, they have a very beautiful tradition of open house. Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, on their festival day, their home is open to anybody. You can go, plenty of food, partake the food, say your wishes, go back. Cultural differences. So certain cultures, they have been brought in such a way that they won't move with the Christians. They won't move with the Jews. This is the problem we are facing. So the more you read about your own holy text, understand. Because if you want to understand the Quran, this is again thing that I'm a problem with my own people. If you want to understand the Quran, you must understand the knowledge outside the Quran first. Otherwise you can't understand that. It's a very difficult book to understand. So the knowledge of the Quran can be only understood if you have the knowledge about the outside world. If you don't have an elementary knowledge about what's happening in science or technology or whatever it is, very difficult to read the Quran and understand it. So pure ignorance is leading some people to have a problem living in this society. Another incident, it is better if I relate what's happening in this country. One day I went to my medical practitioner, the surgery, I was seated there. A mother came, Australian lady, with a child, might be about 1-year-old child, and seated next to me, waiting for their turn. Then the lady came with the hijab, with the burqa, black color. The little poor girl started crying. I got annoyed. I called that lady and said, see what you have done? The innocent girl got frightened of you. People cannot adapt to the place and circumstances in which they live. That is the problem. There's no hard and fast rule that you must wear the burqa. The Quran only says, be modest in your dress. Be modest in your dress. Is that modesty? According to her, yes. I won't approve that. Modest in everything, not only dress, in your eating, in your enjoyment. Be modest. There are ethical concepts in the Quran. But blind reading, because they think that because the Quran was revealed in Arabic, you must read in Arabic. How many of them can understand the language? Purely translating that into English won't do. Translators are traitors. They can kill the original meaning. That's what I tell my people. The biggest mistake the Saudis have done is to translate the Quran and give it to the people. Helpless. And they have put their own versions there. That's one, the opening chapter in the Quran. There are 7 verses. The last verse says, "O God, don't lead me on the path along which some people went astray, or on the path on which you had your own wrath," those people. It doesn't say who they are, but the Saudis have put Christians and Jews. What audacity they have to do this. Completely misleading. And that should be banned, if you ask me. The word kufr, unbelievers. Do you know that the Prophet's father, mother, they were unbelievers. They died before Islam came. A Muslim can be an unbeliever if he does things that are not allowed to be done in the Quran. So what we find here is that the cultural baggage, misunderstanding of the verses, failure to contextualize the verses, and then textualize the context, are the fundamental reasons why some people have problem in liberal societies. There's a wonderful book, Overlapping Consensus Between Islam and Liberal Society. I forgot the author's name. I read it twice. Good research. Over the years, how interpretations have changed over time. And they are completely compatible now in liberal society, in the liberal values, Islam. There's nothing problematic. The scholars have compromised all the time. And so that is the way I look at it. How long should I speak? That's the way I look at it. And I find no reason why I should feel uncomfortable to live in Australia. And I am not uncomfortable with moving with my friends who are not Muslims. And that should be the way, life. That's where the society, we are living in a society. Society, you need give and take, tolerance. These are ethical values ingrained in the holy texts of the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, the Hindus, the Buddhists, everything. Which religion asks you to fight? So, I think it's better if I answer questions from you. So in essence, that's what I want to give you today as my perspective about my religion and the rules and regulations that guide me and how I live in this country. Thank you.
So we have some time now for questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, that gentleman over there.
Are you hearing me? Is it on?
A bit louder, please.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Oh, good. Can you explain the hierarchy in Islam for imams training, as we've got bishops, priests and deacons in Christianity? What's the hierarchy for imams in Islam?
Can someone, I'm very clear what the question is.
What's the hierarchy
It's on.
for
Can any?
imams
Oh.
as they train, as we have bishops and priests and things?
Hierarchy of imams. Let me explain the term for you. They have grabbed this word, the name. Ilm, the word, they are alims. Alims, scholars in knowledge. It comes from the Arabic root ilm. Ilm means knowledge. A person who has the best knowledge is an alim. The plural of alim is ulama. I have every right to call a good scientist an alim. But these imams have grabbed that term and monopolized it and say, alim means only we, the imams. Imams are people who lead the prayers. That's all. If you all trust me, I can lead the prayers. In a congregation, there's no hard and fast regulation that so-and-so must be the imam. In a congregation, if the people congregate, respect me and ask me, Ameer, can you lead the prayer? I can, if I know how to do it. So they have learnt the text, they have learned the rules and regulations in a madrasa. Madrasas are of different types. There are elementary Quranic schools, the basic one, where I learnt to read the Quran up to the age of 10. Actually, I was taught by my auntie. So I sent to this Quranic school. By the age of 10, I finished reading the Quran, memorized whatever was needed, and went to the primary school. No, I was in the grade 5 in the primary school. So that's the elementaries. Then there's a second grade of the madrasas, where they learn a bit more about the meaning of the Quran, the interpretation of the Quran, various imams, what they are saying. The higher level, they go into jurisprudence. Jurisprudence, it expects them to write almost a thesis on what they learn. So there are different grades. But all the madrasas, except places like Al-Azhar in Cairo, in Egypt. Al-Azhar was originally a madrasa. Today it's a university. It was the madrasas that became universities later and went into different disciplines. Now, some of the madrasas stagnated with the orthodox teaching, orthodox sciences. And they are repeating the same thing now. They are parrots. The people who came out of the madrasas are simply parrots, repeating what they learned. There's nothing to interpret because they don't have the outside knowledge. No, I'm saying this not to show my knowledge about Islam. Had I lived in Sri Lanka, I wouldn't have known what I know now about my religion. Because I would have been trained in that environment, in that orthodox beliefs. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to read what I read in Australia over the last 30, 40 years. I have collected in my own personal library about 1,000 books. Quite a number of them are on Islam, on the religion. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to read them. And my knowledge would have stagnated in that country with what I learnt in that madrasa. So the broader you read, the wider knowledge you gather, you become a scholarly in your own religion, which is absent in a number of imams in this country. There is one mufti, the current mufti, I think in Sydney. The mufti is a political appointment. There's no hard and fast status as a mufti. How can you be a mufti in a country without knowing English? That man doesn't know English. So how do you communicate? So these are issues that we face in this country. So if you're a real scholar, a first-class scholar, you may have all the knowledge you need. But if you can't communicate with the ordinary Australian, what's the use? So that is my answer to that question.
Is the restriction on production of images of Muhammad imposed by Sharia law, or is it something written in the Quran?
Sharia law. The Sharia law, I want to make this clear to you, were written, it's wrong to call Sharia law. The fiqh, the laws in Islam, the laws in Islamic jurisprudence, were written and compiled by Muslims, for Muslims, when Muslims were in power. Today, we are not in power. And also, in the history of Islam, until the 20th century, or late in the 19th century, the Muslims don't have an experience of living as a minority anywhere in the world. When they had the caliphate, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and so on and so forth, when they had the caliphate, they are part of one empire. They were not a minority. Today, with the rise of nationalism, independent countries, those people who lived in an empire have now become minorities. So the Sharia, the so-called Sharia, it teaches how Muslim rulers should treat the minority, but doesn't teach how a minority Muslim should live in a majority country. There's no parallel. I written this in a West Australian paper about a couple of years ago. I wrote this. So the Sharia was by Muslims, for Muslims, when they were in power. Now they are in a minority, and there's no guidance in the Sharia about how to live as a minority in a non-Muslim environment. There's no guidance. So it is for the responsibility of this generation to interpret that Sharia. I don't know how many of you are aware of this incident, a tragic incident. In 1983, there was an imam in Sudan, a scholar, who said, your Sharia, the rules and regulations, are mostly based on the verses revealed in Medina. You know, the Prophet lived for 10 years in Mecca, 12 years in Medina. So the 20 of the 23 years, 11 years in Mecca, 12 years in Medina. So the verses were revealed from time to time. But the Sharia law, the so-called Sharia law, was based on the verses revealed in Medina. So this Imam said, why don't we look at it from the verses revealed in Mecca? The Meccan verses, the verses start like, Ya ayyuhal insan, They address the insan. Insan means man. Oh man. So universal. But in Medina, it comes as mu'min. Ya ayyuhal mu'minun. Believers. Difference. Man is general, universal. Believers for one community. So this difference he pointed out. If we can rethink about the Sharia from the point of view of those verses revealed in Mecca, we won't have any problem. But Orthodoxy won't allow that. For saying that, he was hanged by Numeri in 1983. This is in a community where in the 9th century, under the Abbasid caliphs, Jews, Christians, Hindus, everybody was invited to his palace and discuss about problems. That's how science was born in 9th century. They became the pioneers of rationalism in Baghdad at that time. This part of the history our Imams don't know. They don't read. That is the problem we are facing here. I hope I answered your question, sir. No? What is the question?
I don't know whether you heard the first part of my question. It was that is the restriction on production of images of Muhammad imposed by Sharia law, or is it written within the Quran?
Worshipping idols. Again, there's a context here. Good, I thank you for asking the question. When the Prophet captured Mecca in 632, all the idols were destroyed inside the Kaaba. There were 360 odd idols, all destroyed, except 2 drawings which the Prophet covered with his hand and said, "Don't erase them." What were those drawings? Jesus and Mary. You will be surprised. The only woman's name mentioned in the Quran in one whole chapter is about Mary, not about the Prophet's wife or mother. If you know Arabic, you can read that particular verse, or if you ask some Qari, the expert on reading the Quran, you will cry. The way he describes about the birth of Jesus. So at that time, idol worship was prohibited. But today, I have a piece of art in my home. I don't worship them. Again, one incident, hilarious, back home in Sri Lanka. My father-in-law had a guava tree. When the guava tree was growing, there were 2 plants were growing. He just pinned them up, twisted them. And when it matured, the tree died, so we chopped that bottom part. That twisted part, my carpenter made it into a lampshade. If you look at it from a distance, as if a nude woman standing like this. Now, my uncle, very orthodox Muslim, he came home, he looked at it. "Ameer, what is this? You're worshipping idol." He says, "Shut up. That's a piece of art." But this is the problem we are facing. We don't worship idols, true. It doesn't mean that we can condemn a piece of art. Piece of that drawings that have been subject to all sorts of criticisms. Again, lack of knowledge, total ignorance. Humor. He was just throwing a cartoon, a humor. See the contradictions that in our community. There are lots of contradictions, sir. A few years ago, when I was working for John Howard government, there was a conference in Jakarta. It went for 2-3 days, I think. In between each session, they had musical items to entertain the guests. There was one item where the song was the song sung for the Prophet when he went to Medina. And they recited that with all the drums and modern instruments, drums and violin, all sorts of things. I saw the Saudi delegate, his eyes going red. He said, "How dare can you insult that, those lines with this kafir, non-Muslim music?" Then there was another gentleman, a guest from Iran. He said, "Look, man, if you can enjoy the poetry of a certain poet in Baghdad who was a homosexual, his poetry were all about homosexuality, and they teach that. So if you can read that one, why can't you do this music?" See the contradiction? So people, our people, that nothing to enjoy a piece of cartoon, nothing to enjoy a piece of humor, why do you want to kill them? Salman Rushdie wrote that book, but he used the wrong medium to give the message. And he was sentenced to death by Khomeini without reading that book also. He didn't even read that book. This is the ignorance we have in our community. And that's the basis of the extremism that's going on.
I have one final question about living well in community. You said that your personal faith has benefited from being here in Australia. And throughout the Abrahamic traditions, it seems that some of the times of flourishing of faith have been in times of exile and persecution and minority. Do you think that as religion and state continue to separate, that actually both faith and secular society benefit mutually from a division?
What is secularism? Secularism, rationalism, rational thinking. There was a book, I don't know whether you read it, God for Secularists. I read that book. Yeah. Rationalism. Who started the rational thinking? The Mu'tazilites. In 9th century. Avicenna, as you know, Avicenna, Ibn Rushd, he was known as the Anglicized name, I've forgotten. Ibn Rushd, pioneers of rational thinking. It is from that rational thinkers Europe became enlightened. Because Greek knowledge was lost for the Europeans. They didn't go on. They were in the age of darkness. It was the Muslims who dug that knowledge, built it up, handed it over to the Europeans again, enlightenment. This is a very interesting history which many people don't understand. So, as religion does not confront with rationalism. Religion is rationalism. If you think deeply, go deeply into religion, you become a rational human being. Except the word, there may be some word, Jesus, Muhammad, Allah, Jehovah and all that. Except that, look at the teachings. Can't you justify rationally what the Bible says? Can't you justify rationally what the Quran says? So where's the clash? I can't see the clash. So I'm living in a rational society, a liberal society, and I see the coherence between my religion and the society in which I live. In fact, not only me, there's a beautiful book by Professor Naim. He said that, he was writing from America. He said, I'm a better Muslim in America than my own country. That's my answer.
We've reached the end of our time, unfortunately. I'm sure we could go on a lot longer. I've just got something for you. Thank you very much for coming along and speaking to us and giving us insights into Islam. And we're very grateful for that. And we'd like to accept that. Thank you. Very useful, thank you. Next week is our final one, and Lebbe, who's sitting there, is going to speak to us from a non-religious perspective. So I hope to see you all next week. Thank you.